Hello and welcome to the ReConnect podcast, a weekly show sponsored by the Anasazi Foundation and powered by Sturry Studios. I'm Ganel-Lyn Condie, your host. I'm so grateful you've joined us, where we have conversations to help you strengthen your most important relationships and reconnect with those that matter most. Hello and welcome to the ReConnect podcast. I'm Ganel-Lyn Condie, your host. We are excited to be with you today. We are here at the Sturry Studios where we film the ReConnect podcast, and we are sponsored by the Anasazi Foundation. Periodically, I love to just share a personal message with you and some thoughts that are on my mind. And I also enjoy having guests, and we have some great guests coming up on the podcast, so I hope that you will tune in for those messages as well. The thoughts that have been on my mind center around something that's kind of trendy right now, which is mindfulness. Everyone's kind of talking about mindfulness and meditation, and there's apps galore that you can download on your phone and use, and it's kind of this cool word to pass around right now. I hear it a lot, even in elementary schools, which is wonderful because I think our children are having an increase in anxiety, depression, and they need every coping tool we can give them. And I really believe mindfulness is one of those great tools to help with mental health and help our children navigate. But specifically, whatever we do, whatever we model, then our children are more likely to do. But I wanted to dig deeper into what mindfulness really means, because sometimes we throw that word around, and I think the idea is that we're all sitting around meditating in this very Zen-like state, and we are not being distracted by sounds, and we're going to another realm in our minds. And I think mindfulness is so much more, and it's very user-friendly during the day. So instead of thinking of mindfulness just in that meditation box, that you have to set aside time, you have to be in this very vacuum-like state to kind of focus and go there, I want to share some ideas on developing mindfulness tools that I hope you can share with your kids, because here at the ReConnect podcast, we are about connection and reconnection, and it starts with us as individuals. When we navigate a life where we're connected to self, then we are more likely to connect to those that we care about and love. So first off, I'm going to share with you 5 different mindfulness areas of your life that maybe you haven't considered, that's beyond meditation. Mindfulness breathing is amazing, but it doesn't have to be complicated. I call it the box, the 4x4x4x4. So what do I mean by that? When we perfectly breathe, our hands can be on our bellies and we can feel that rise happen. But what I like to do is just be aware of 4 counts of in-breath, 4 counts out-breath, pause for 4 counts, and do it again. And you do that 4 times. And if you do that, you can do that anywhere. Today, I was stuck in traffic, and I could feel myself going into that fight and flight feeling. And so I started some mindful breathing, where I visualize breathing out the stress and in the peace. And it pulls you out of that fight and flight, because that 4x4 breathing, if you do it 4 times, can actually reset your nervous system. So instead of focusing on what your worry is, let go of the thinking, and you can even teach your kids this, the idea of what they're stressed about, you're breathing it out through your mouth, and then the peace comes through your nose, and then out through your mouth, in through your nose 4 times. So mindful breathing is the first tip. The next one is mindfully observing something. I think when you're around a new baby, you can see this happening. Young children and babies are brilliant at mindful observation. They can look at a ball, a bird, a feather, a piece of fuzz on the carpet, and they are mesmerized because they are so mindful and present. They're not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. They are right there in the moment. And so one practice that kind of is the underlining of mindful observation for me is gratitude. I can notice my desk and appreciate that I have it. I can notice my car, even though it needs a good wash right now. Grateful that it got me here safely today to the studio. And so as we focus on these details, as you just notice it, it actually brings you to the present moment and out of that fight and flight again. So instead of just looking at a plant on the table in front of you. Notice the color, notice the texture of the leaves, and be very mindful about your observing. Mindful listening is a really great one because there are so many apps. There's even YouTube channels that will play like 18 hours of relaxation music or tones that can kind of help reset your mind. And so choosing a favorite piece of music, instead of just having it go in the background, be really mindful about listening to the notes. Is there a classical piece of music that your family could sit around and maybe have an activity where you listen and you visualize what comes through the music? Instead of being in this constant world of distraction, we always have our phones, we always have texting, we always have something that we're doing, multitasking. Our brains are tired because they're constantly in that state. What mindfulness is about is staying present, is bringing everything to what you're doing right there in the moment. And listening is a really great technique for that. Mindful doing. This is one of my favorites. I actually didn't do that very well this morning. Mindful doing is like something that you do that you don't even really have to think about. It's not higher level thinking. Weeding, folding the laundry, doing the dishes, driving. Driving is a classic one. This morning, I had to be on a television show, and I'm there every month, and so I'm used to what route I'm supposed to take, and I was not mindfully driving. My mind was thinking about the podcast today, and the segment on TV, and a speaking event tonight, and worries about my kids, and back to school shopping, and all of that. And I had typed in the address just so I could see the traffic, and all of a sudden I am on the freeway thinking I'm heading in the right direction, and I look down at the GPS and it's adjusted and it's getting me there right when I'm supposed to be live, and I panicked and realized I had taken the wrong freeway. There were too many things in my head, and I was not mindfully driving. And it was such a great lesson on why it's important to sometimes take away the distraction when we're driving. We hear that for safety purposes. And this is a great thing to talk about with your new teen drivers. Mindful driving could be meditative time where they can reground and refocus maybe after school or on their way to their job. And that means maybe you turn down the radio, turn off the radio, and you just focus on the driving. And what's beautiful about that, I have a friend that she goes out into her garden. She's a life coach and she teaches these tools. And one of the best places for her to practice mindfulness is out in her garden because she doesn't have to overthink weeding. And so the next time you have to do one of those mundane tasks that we don't like to do, we don't love to vacuum or do the dishes or whatever, maybe reframe that and reframe it in a way that this is your mindfulness time and that you're just going to focus on your breathing and do the task at hand. And then the last tip that I have for encouraging and maybe fostering more mindfulness in your life is mindfulness with your senses. So taste, smell, and touch. This is a great one to send your kids off to school with. A lot of kids feel this back to school anxiety of new teachers, friends, homework, and all of that. Mindfulness sensory awareness is such a great easy thing to teach even your kindergartner, first and second, third graders. You can teach them, but by just touching something, like maybe you give them a fuzzy ball or that they can hold and they touch that if they start to feel anxious, and they do that mindful breathing and touching at the same time, and that can really ground them. Maybe it's just touching their desk, maybe they tap their toe, and that helps them know that they're in their bodies and they're mindful about that. Mindful smelling. Invite them to get curious about the smells in their classroom or in their school or on the playground. And so the next time they find themselves in an anxious fight and flight state of mind, they can pause and for a moment just be aware of the smells. And then there's, I think our favorite one, all of us love, is the taste one. And so whether that's a lollipop or a sucker, do they even call them lollipops anymore? I don't even know. But instead of just mindlessly eating, mindfully tasting your food, it brings you once again back to the present. And so instead of going into this constant state of multitasking that we are kind of always functioning on, this hum that is always in our minds, the to-do list, the worry list is always going. Even if you practice this, set your timer on your phone to remind you. Maybe you know there's certain times of day. For me, it's late hours in the afternoon. So I call them the bewitching hours from 3 to 5, where moms are busy trying to figure out dinner and do homework, and we're running on empty because we've already gone through a full day of to-do lists and work, and we're running on empty. One of the things that I tried to do when my kids were young is right before they came home from school, that's when I would go have some meditation time or mindfulness time, because it kind of reset me, regrounded me, and it's amazing, just a few minutes of doing anything mindful, whether it's mindful breathing, observing, listening, doing, whether that's a chore or driving, and then sensory issues will really help you connect with you, and then you are able to reconnect with those around you. I hope that these suggestions will help you be more present in your life, that they will help you feel a greater connection and presence in your life instead of just moving through your life, but mindfully showing up for the people and things that matter to you. And I'm so grateful that you've shared this podcast. We love to hear from listeners on how these interviews and messages have helped in some way. So thank you for continuing your support of the ReConnect podcast. And thank you again to the Story Studios and Anasazi Foundation for your support of this show.
Thank you for listening to the ReConnect podcast, presented by Anasazi Foundation. Are you worried about your teenager? Are they struggling with depression, low self-esteem, anger, drugs, or suicidal thoughts and feelings? If so, Anasazi Foundation can help. Anasazi is a wilderness therapy program for at-risk youth, and our mission is to help turn hearts homeward. To learn more about us, please visit anasazi.org. If you liked this show, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Thank you again.